This show is brought to you in part by viewers like you who joined a Patreon or become YouTube members. Thank you. And if you could, hit the like button and subscribe if you want more Browns-focused content.
Hey, what's up? Welcome to QnA, the show where I take your questions and answer them here in video format. Ton to get into, so let's just jump into it. Question here is from Sad, who ironically asks a question about wanting to feel a little bit happier. He says, Q, or they say, Sad says, Q, trying to be a little bit more optimistic and maybe look at more of a positive scenario. If we hit on two dogs at running back in this draft this year and Chubb starts looking like his old self again, what does our run game look like next year? How do we manage our running back room with three good running backs, especially if none of them are obvious third down backs? There's a lot of different ways you can manage it, quite frankly. You could have all three of them play. You could just have it to be where, if, like, let's say you draft Caleb Johnson and Nick Chubb looks like its old self, but you also have R.J. Harvey. You would just have R.J. Harvey get his snaps where he can get his snaps, but it would mainly be about Caleb Johnson and Nick Chubb for the time being, with R.J. Harvey being somebody to work in later down the line once Chubb becomes less effective. So you wouldn't have to worry about working all three in necessarily, but you would work them in eventually down the line, given that Nick Chubb's at an older age and he's on this part of his career where he's on 1 year contract. After 1 year contract. Now, how did the Browns improve the run game? You hit it on the head. You could draft running backs, but that's not the only thing that's going to improve the run game. I think the Browns could make moves here on the offensive line, right? Alaric Jackson, somebody who you could get as a tackle who can block really well for you. You can get a center in free agency. That's where I would prefer the Browns go after, is center at free agency, and improve two spots on the offensive line. So that can make you better. Going back to the old white zone should make you a little bit better there too. So improving some of the personnel on the offensive line, I think, is important, but also adding some fresh bodies back there at the running back position. Another thing that helps things dramatically, because I think the Browns just haven't had great personnel there outside of Nick Chubb in that running back room for the last couple of years. We've tried with Jerome Ford. There's been moments of brilliance with him, but too many times where you just end up frustrated with how he decides to go about a carry. Same thing with Pierre Strong or the last flashes of Kareem Hunt while he was here, where he was really being used like a fullback. So there's just a bunch of different things they have to do to get better at the run game. But if they do improve their run game, I do think they'll be rewarded greatly. Thomas says, in our situation, would you rather take a running back earlier or later in a draft compared to offensive line? I feel like we need to draft at least one or two big men prospects. We also need to address the backfield issues. Which would you address first, in particular in the draft, assuming we go quarterback or defensive impact player too? Again, with anything about how you handle the draft, right? Like, a lot of this is going to come down to how the board ends up, right? The Browns aren't going to go into this draft thinking we need to get two at this position, two at that position, two at this position. It's going to be about how the board ends up falling to them and what players are available to them in order for them to make the best decisions possible in this draft. So if there is an offensive lineman that they like, now, that being said, I do think that there is more scarcity at the offensive line than there is at running back. So if you do run into an offensive lineman you have a first-round grade on versus a running back you have a first-round grade on, you're likely to break that tie with the offensive lineman, a tackle, just because you know you can get a running back who's not that different from the one you had a first-round grade on later in the draft, maybe in the third round, but the fall off at tackle is a bit more steep here. So I think that's probably where the Browns would lean towards, is if there is a steal at tackle at 33 or something like that, I think they would be willing to go after it. So it's also going to be interesting to see, like, who tries to jump ahead of the Browns at 33 into the first round if there is a tackle available or something along those lines. All right, and then Nathaniel says, in a world where the Browns trade Myles, what differences could we notice on defense from how opposing teams attack us now? Will we notice defensive players that are significantly less effective now? The secondary will be a problem because what teams will do without Myles out there is hold the ball longer. And this Browns secondary, Denzel Ward in particular, has always had an issue with giving up big plays, right? And it's not like Denzel gives up big plays all the time, right? He's one of the best corners in the NFL. But there are miscommunications that happen, especially over extended plays with the secondary. And you're going to see a lot more of that if Myles is not out there defensively. So that's where I think teams would attack you, is the secondary. That would definitely be, if I were a team going up against the Browns without Myles Garrett, where I would try to attack them. Bryce Holt says, Q, barely have heard this name this offseason, but it's pretty much a sure thing that we let Jedrick Wills walk, right? Yes, man. Jedrick Wills is likely gone. I don't see a world where they really go out their way to re-sign Jed. Given that Jedrick Wills, didn't he basically quit on the team at the end of the year? I know he was technically injured, but he talked about not wanting to play. It's a business decision and all of that junk. Yeah, he burnt every bridge in Cleveland. He don't want to come back. The Browns don't want him back. Yeah, man, it's not. He's not returning. I doubt it. I highly doubt it that he'd be returning. Anthony says, what do you think is fair compensation for Trevor Lawrence would be from the Jags' new front office if they decide to move on? Okay, I've heard people throw out this scenario that the Jaguars are going to trade Trevor Lawrence. I'm here to tell you that's a fairy tale. Now, I know people get on me all the time because they're like, oh, well, I don't think Matt Stafford's going to get traded here. Like, Matt Stafford is significantly more believable of a trade target, given that their GM is talking about trading him openly right now, than Trevor Lawrence, who they're not even considering for trade options. And why would the Jaguars trade him? It's the one thing the Jaguars have to look forward to, is that they do have a young, intriguing quarterback prospect in Trevor Lawrence. Now, what would the fair compensation for Trevor Lawrence be? Like, at least 3 first-round picks. You would be paying what you paid for Deshaun Watson. That would be the price for Trevor Lawrence. You could think that's fair. You could think that's not fair, but that would be the price. Like, anybody who suggests that you could get him for less than that, they're lying. It would be 3 first-round picks. It would be some mid-round picks. It would have to be the same Godfather deal that we want for Myles Garrett. And no, you cannot swap Trevor Lawrence for Myles Garrett because that makes no sense for the Jaguars to do. So, yeah, absolutely not somebody that's going to be in the crosshairs for the Cleveland Browns. Yeah, just not realistic at all, right? Like, there are limits to your imagination in the offseason. I think Trevor Lawrence is clearly past it. And, like, honestly, do you want the Browns to do that again? Do you want the Browns to commit 3 first-round picks to another quarterback with a history of somewhat succeeding like Deshaun Watson was? Like, do you want the Browns to do anything that even reminds you, is reminiscent of what they just got out of and still are trying to get out of? I don't. Luke says, could Travis Hunter be a good fit for the Browns if he decides to play both sides of the ball, or will he be cornerback 2 besides Denzel and maybe wide? He is not playing wide receiver full-time in the NFL. So I would just look at him. How I look at Travis Hunter, even though I think he is a good wide receiver and could play wide receiver in the league, how I look at Travis Hunter is as a cornerback, because by the end of that rookie deal, he is likely going to be a full-time quarterback. Like, maybe you start him out the first year, you play him a little wide receiver, but for the bulk of that rookie deal, he's going to play corner. That being said, yes, it would be a fit next to Denzel for a lot of reasons. And, like, I think Myles requesting a trade actually raises the chances that the Browns go Travis over Abdul. And the reason I think that's the case is if Myles is not here, your secondary is going to get attacked more. So you want to make sure your secondary is rock solid. And Denzel Ward and Travis Hunter would be a very solid DB duo that you can load up there. I would rather just get an edge rusher and have a balanced attack where you still have a star on both levels, hopefully, because you hope Abdul Carter can turn into a star. But yeah, I could see that making more sense to the Cleveland Browns to go after the corner. And we know that this front office loves them some corners. All right, we got a big question from Delk who says, Myles, during a TMZ Street interview, didn't answer the question if there's anything the Browns could do to keep you. I find that to be a very weird thing not to answer. He has a trade request and flirted with the idea of playing with other teams already to the media in other interviews, Greg Newsome, Denzel Ward. And Myles himself has said they don't think the team is too far off from winning, but they also need from the Browns to solidify the quarterback position. Could you see the trade request as being a way for Myles to force the Browns into making a competitive move at quarterback and halting the potential rebuild? Or could you most likely see just one out of Cleveland? Could you see a more aggressive offseason to keep us competitive and change Myles' mind if he really wants to go? I think that this isn't 100%, as Myles puts it, about going to a contender, because none of this smells like it's 100% about going to a contender, right? Like, a lot of this feels like he just want to go, right? For whatever reason, he feel like it's time for him to go. And that's his prerogative. But that's why there's that dissonance there, right? He's telling you it's 100% about the on-the-field situation, when I don't think that's true, because if it was 100% about the on-the-field situation, he would be more interested in working with the front office to see what they could do to be more competitive at the quarterback position. I think Myles just kind of wants to do different things and play different places. It's really what it comes down to, right? Some people are fine playing their whole career one team. Some people want to be more adventurous. I think Myles is somebody who wants to be a little bit more adventurous. That being said, is there anything that the Browns could do to keep him? I mean, in the short term, I think there is, right? But long term, I think Myles wants to play for a different team. Like, I think he's going to eventually hit free agency or, be traded and play for somebody else. So you just got to prepare yourself for that reality. I don't think he wants to play his whole career in Cleveland. And in a way, it kind of feel like cold feet, don't it? Like, don't this whole thing feel like cold feet before a wedding? Like, somebody realized they don't want to get married right before a wedding, because like the Browns felt like pretty strong about getting the extension out of Myles, and then AB says a thing about going from Cleveland to Canton, and then Myles like repeats that in his letter, and it just feel like he realized that if he signs an extension with Cleveland, that his career is going to be in Cleveland. He got cold feet about it, and like he's using this situation to say it's about winning, which I bet some of it is about, but it feel like cold feet or like somebody who just don't want to play one place their whole career. That's my guess on it, but y'all let me know y'all interpretations of all of this. Hey Q, longtime Browns fan from the UK. Love everything you do. Appreciate that, man. I 100% don't want to trade Myles. He's a generational talent. If we absolutely have to trade him, what do you think of trading him to contenders for 2 first-round picks, 2 seconds, and their backups, QBs? I'm thinking the Lions with Hooker, Packers with Malik Willis, and the Vikings with McCarthy. There is a significant drop-off between J.J. McCarthy and Hendon Hooker and Malik Willis. And like, I think the Vikings would be the only one I would be forced to consider, but everybody else, I'm not about to trade Myles Garrett and think that I'm about to sell that Hendon Hooker's the quarterback going forward or Malik Willis is the quarterback prize. Like, you could have got them dudes with late round picks. You ain't have to trade Myles to get them. The only guy I think you got to trade Myles to get is like J.J. McCarthy. So that's the only one I could justify trading Myles for. But all them other dudes, I couldn't justify it. So, yeah, I think you're on the right idea here, right, Neil, where the Browns should use Myles to get a quarterback. I think 2 of the 3 teams are just the wrong fit here. Either the Browns need to trade him for like a J.J. McCarthy, which I don't even know if I would be super excited about, but it would be hope at the quarterback position, legitimate hope at the quarterback position, or you need to trade him for a top 5 pick this year if you like Cam Ward or Shador and you think you can get him in the top 5, or you need to trade him for a first round pick next year so you can move up and get your guy wherever that guy is if you have to move up. I mean, if not, you can use that pick to help the guy that you draft in the first round next year. So a lot of different ways the Browns could go about it. But yeah, that's one of them. I think the path is right. I just don't think the teams you had in there were all good. But next question comes from A. Puckett, who says, what's the film breakdown difference between Will Howard and Bo Nix? I just think it's easier. He's better than a third-round pick if you have time. Kyle McCord seems like a good quarterback. We'll see if I got time for Kyle McCord, but I do know I'm going to have time for Will Howard. So if you want to see a film breakdown on Will Howard, keep your eyes locked on your subscription box on Monday because that's going to drop then. Bowler BP says, so with the report of the Rams looking for a first for Stafford in your recent video of how the Browns can maneuver the cap, my question is whether a trade of 2 for the Rams picks, 26 and Cup would be something you'd be interested in. I think this would be a win-now combination that could convince Myles to stay while only altering your draft haul from early first to a late first, which if you aren't talking about a quarterback, I prefer the combo of Mike Green or Shamar Stewart with Stafford, Myles, and Cup as opposed to Abdul Carter alone. Granted, this trade might cause cap hell, but that's Barry's strengths, cap gymnastics, thoughts. It would be how do I put this? It would be an aggressive trade, a very aggressive move. I don't know how I would feel about it immediately because like having a swap of first is more of a price than I was expecting to have to pay for Matt Stafford. Short term, I do think it would be helpful. Long term, I don't know if it's going to achieve what we want it to, right? Because long term, we're talking about, does this get Myles to sign a big ass extension? If this just gets Myles to play out his contract and you don't win a Super Bowl in the next 2 years, then this is going to have some very negative consequences down the line. But if you can get Myles to sign an extension with this, I guess you can make it work, right? But it's definitely one of the more creative scenarios that anybody has brought up. So thank you for dropping that one. I haven't really thought about that one. I want to think about that more. But thank you for dropping that question there. And thank you guys for dropping these questions. Y'all have a great day. Have you a better night.